Welcome back. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from today? We'd love to know. Now get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's dive into today's gripping story. The cold didn't just arrive that evening, it seemed to stalk the land long before the sun dipped. It was the kind of cold that didn't only sting your skin, it crept into your bones like an unwelcome secret and refused to leave. The mountain air had that hushed heaviness, the unnatural kind that could make even the bravest person glance over their shoulder and wonder what shadows were watching. Deputy Ethan Hale drove his patrol SUV at a careful crawl along the curved, weather-worn service road on the far outskirts of Maple Glen. Out here, the little town felt more like a hidden outpost than a dot on the map. A quiet pocket cradled deep between the folded shoulders of the Adirondacks Mountains. Tall pines flanked the road like solemn guards on both sides, their limbs dusted with dry snow. The heavy boughs bent slightly, whispering against each other whenever the wind dared to pass through. Overhead, the sky was dimming into that bruised purple, shade of winter dusk that had always made Ethan wary. Too quiet, too still. The sort of stillness that didn't sit right with a lawman's instincts. Beside him sat his partner, not the kind you swapped jokes with over morning coffee, but one who had saved his life more than once. Max, a weathered but sharp-eyed German shepherd, sat tall in the passenger seat like he belonged there. Muscles still taut from years of disciplined training, amber eyes scanning the world beyond the glass. He'd been with Ethan through messes no one in town wanted to talk about, disappearances that made headlines for a week, midnight calls to break up fights in cabins people had forgotten were even standing. Max wasn't one for noise. He never barked without reason. So when it came, that deep guttural growl rolling low from the dog's chest, Ethan's hands tightened around the steering wheel without thinking. Max's head snapped toward the tree line. It wasn't casual curiosity, it was targeted focus, the sort of thing that meant something's wrong. Pay attention now. His ears stood tall. His posture went rigid, every muscle loaded with tension. He stared into the dark between, the pines with a soldier's concentration. Then came the sound, a faint whine, not frightened, but certain. A sound that said, "I know what I smell, and it doesn't belong here." Max's nose pressed hard to the passenger window, fogging the glass with quick clouds of breath. He barked once, short, sharp, cutting through the cold air like a warning shot. Ethan didn't waste a single breath asking why. He knew that tone. Max had picked up on something alive out there, and not the kind that wandered harmless in the dark. He eased the SUV onto the snow-crusted shoulder, tires crunching. The engine idled low, and Ethan's fingers automatically went to the heavy flashlight resting between the seats. "What is it, boy?" His voice dropped without him realizing it, just above a whisper. He stepped out into the evening, and the cold bit his face with the force of a slap. The air held the sting of pine sap, a faint curl of distant chimney smoke, and something else, a stillness so deep it felt like the forest itself had stopped breathing. Max landed beside him soundlessly, hitting the frozen shoulder with the ease of hundreds of practiced exits. His nose went to work immediately, sweeping in methodical arcs over the frost, the way trained noses do when they've found a trail. Left, right, then still. That low growl returned, deeper this time. Max's head snapped to the right, toward a dense thicket that overhung the road's edge where the forest swallowed the light early. His eyes locked as if the trees themselves had given him instructions. Then Ethan saw movement. At first, it was nothing more than a shape, pressed low among the brush, wrapped in fabric that caught what little light filtered from the headlights. For a heartbeat, Ethan thought it might be a discarded jacket twisted in the branches, but then the shape shifted, swayed, alive. A child. She emerged in unsteady steps, maybe 5 years old, barefoot on frozen ground, her skin taking on that pale grayish tint that screams too cold, too long. Her dress had once been a cheerful pink, but now it hung in tatters, the fabric dirty and streaked with something darker than mud. Her tiny arms squeezed herself tight, like she was the only warmth she had left. In one trembling hand, she clutched a crumpled scrap of paper. Ethan lowered himself slowly, instincts pressing for calm. "Hey there, sweetheart. My name's Ethan. I'm with the police. You're safe now, okay?" His words came out slow, careful, each one meant to land like a blanket. Her eyes lifted. Blue eyes, wide and glassy, with tears half frozen at the corners. Her lips parted, but no cry came. Instead, a whisper. "Please, help me save my mommy." The air around them seemed to rearrange. Everything shifted in that moment. But Ethan locked that thought down. First, she needed warmth, safety and care. Then came the truth behind those haunted words. He stepped forward without rushing her. She didn't pull back. Her lips still trembled, equal parts cold and something heavier. Max was inches away, watching her with that strangely human stillness. He saved for situations like this, ears forward, body a wall between her and everything else. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Ethan kept his tone soft but steady. The child blinked once, twice, her voice barely catching. "Lily." Another pause, as if remembering the rest. "Lily Monroe." "All right, Lily. Can I carry you to my truck? It's warm there." She gave the smallest nod, almost invisible. When he lifted her, Ethan felt almost no weight, just the sharp points of bones beneath two thin shoulders, wrapped around a heart beating far too fast. She clung to the collar of his jacket with one small hand, but her other stayed fixed around that crumpled paper. They reached the SUV. Ethan opened the back door carefully and set her onto the seat, wrapping her inside his heavy patrol coat. The coat dwarfed her, but the warmth was immediate. Max climbed in without command, settling beside her, close enough to guard but not crowd. She didn't move away. Ethan keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Deputy Hale. I've located a juvenile female, approximate age 5, on Timberline Road off County Route 6. No shoes, visible bruising, possibly hypothermic. I'm requesting medical and child services to meet us at the station." Over. Lily was still holding that paper. Ethan tilted his head. "Can I take a look at what you've got there?" She hesitated, then placed it in his hand with slow, reluctant fingers. It was a child's drawing, quick lines, shapes rushed in a hurry. 3 figures, a woman, a little girl, and beside them, a much larger, imposing figure. But where the man's face should have been, thick black scribbles tore across the page, layer on layer, an angry, permanent erasure. Over it, an enormous black X slashed through the place where his features should live. Ethan forced down the tightening in his throat. "Is that your mom?" She nodded once. "She told me to run. When he got mad, she screamed, and I knew it was time." "Do you know where she is now?" Lily's thin arm lifted, pointing unsteadily into the forest they'd driven past. "He took her to the gray house, by the river. He dragged her." Max's ears pricked. That silent canine way of marking danger. Ethan met those eyes, then followed Lily's gaze to the line of trees. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start a war. And more importantly, scent. "You ready?" he murmured. Max sniffed once. Then again, his ears shot up. That was all Ethan needed. They entered the woods at first light, the trees standing tall like cathedral pillars. Footsteps were muffled under wet leaves and moss. Ethan moved ahead with Max leading the way, nose low, tail rigid. Maya followed close behind, her eyes scanning everything, every branch, every bend in the trail. After 20 minutes, Max slowed, then stopped. Ethan crouched. "What is it, boy?" Max sniffed the air, turned left, and veered off the old trail, straight into dense brush. Ethan followed without hesitation, pushing aside brambles and low-hanging branches. Then they saw it, half sunken into the earth. Almost hidden by vines and fallen limbs stood a shack, wooden walls bowed from rot. The windows were boarded. Their roof sagged under snow. No lights, no movement, but smoke, thin, fresh, rose from somewhere behind. Max stood motionless, ears forward, body taut like wire. Maya whispered behind him, "We're close." Ethan didn't answer. His hand hovered over his weapon, and his pulse began to rise. They had found the place. Now came the hard part. Ethan crouched behind a tangle of bare roots, eyes fixed on the shack just 20 feet ahead. The forest held its breath. Even the wind seemed to wait. Max was stoned still beside him, shoulders squared, tail flat, ears tilted forward. Every muscle in the shepherd's body was drawn tight, ready. From inside the shack, a muffled voice broke the silence. Sharp, erratic. A man pacing, muttering, slamming something against a wall. Then came another sound, a woman crying. Maya, crouched behind a tree to Ethan's left, gave him a single nod. She had her sidearm drawn and breath steady. Ease never left. The door. Ethan spoke softly into his radio. Two bodies inside, one pacing, one stationary. Suspect likely armed. "We go on my signal." He reached down, brushing a hand along Max's back. The dog's muscles twitched under his glove. Then now Ethan moved like a shadow, boots silent on the wet earth. He reached the side of the shack, flattening himself against the rotting wood. Max followed, steps precise, trained, lethal. Inside, Thayman's voice rose. "You think they care about you, huh? You think anyone's coming? You're mine. You always were." Then a crash. A gasp. That was enough. Ethan pulled back the tattered canvas covering the door and burst in, voice firm, loud. "Police! Drop the weapon!" Reed Morgan spun around, wild-eyed, dragging. Claire by the wrist. Her hands were bound, her lip bloodied, but her eyes were wide with hope. She'd heard the voice. Reed shoved her forward like a shield, rage distorting his scarred face. "I'll kill her! Don't think I won't! He never got the chance!" Max lunged with terrifying speed. The shepherd launched forward, shoulder low, jaws wide. He hit Reed square in the chest, teeth locking around his arm, dragging him down in a blur of snarls and flailing limbs. Reed screamed, thrashing, but Max held fast. Ethan rushed in, yanked Claire to safety, and spun back with his weapon drawn. "Don't move!" he shouted. Maya stormed in behind him, gun raised. Two backup officers tackled Reed, pried Max off, and wrestled the man to the ground. Handcuffs clicked. The screaming stopped. Ethan turned back to Claire. She was on the floor, gasping, shaking, hair stuck to her face. Her first words came out in a whisper. "Is Lily safe?" Ethan's voice cracked as he knelt beside her. "She is. She made it out. She found us. She saved you." Claire dropped to her knees before Ethan could even speak again. Her breath came in broken gasps, too shallow to steady, too loud to control. She clutched her bound hands to her face and let out a raw, trembling sob. Not the kind born of pain, but the kind torn from weeks of fear finally unraveling all at once. Her shoulders shook violently, as though her body could no longer hold the weight she had carried alone in silence. The sound that escaped her lips was jagged, half cry, half relief, an outpouring of everything she'd tried so hard not to feel. Tears soaked the sides of her palms as she rocked forward, curling inward, trying to hold herself together, but failing. "She's safe," she whispered, as if needing to say it out loud to believe it. "My baby's safe." Ethan knelt beside her and gently reached for her wrists, cutting the zip ties with one quick motion. Her arms fell limply to her lap, trembling. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. All she could do was cry like someone who hadn't cried in far too long. Max stood nearby, chest rising, mouth open, tongue out, but his eyes were locked on the woman he had just helped save. The storm had passed, though. The air still carried the weight of everything it had taken with it. The clinic room was warm, quiet, and dimly lit. Walls painted soft yellow, the kind meant to soothe. Outside, the snowfall had thinned, replaced by a hush that settled over Maple Glen like a blanket. Player sat upright in the hospital bed, arms wrapped tightly around her daughter, as if letting go for even a second might break the spell of safety. Lily clung just as hard, her face buried against her mother's chest, fingers curled into the thin fabric of the hospital gown. Neither spoke for a long time. They didn't need to. Lily had fallen asleep not long after their union, exhausted, emotionally, spent but breathing slow and steady now. Herberty pressed close to Claire's, one hand still curled in the folds of her gown. At the foot of the bed, Max lay curled like a sentry, his big head resting on his paws, ears flicking now and then with the distant creak of a hallway door. His eyes, though half-lidded, remained fixed on the child he'd helped save. In the far corner of the room, Ethan stood in silence, his uniform jacket folded over one arm, the other resting loosely by his side. He looked different now. Still the same man, but softer somehow, like a knot inside him had finally loosened. Claire glanced up, eyes glassy but clear. Her voice cracked when she spoke. He hasn't left her side. Ethan nodded, voice low. Max remembers. He doesn't forget the ones he fins. Claire didn't speak again, but the way she looked at Ethan, quiet, full of something between gratitude and disbelief, said enough. There were no grand gestures, no promises made aloud, just the knowledge that somehow, against the odds, the right people had found each other in time. Lily stirred slightly in her sleep, sighing against her mother's chest, and Max lifted his head, ears twitching as if making sure all was still well. Then, satisfied, he laid it back down and closed his eyes. Ethan moved to the doorway, pausing for just a moment to take in the scene. A mother who survived, a child who didn't give up, and a dog who refused to stop searching. He exhaled slowly and turned to go. Behind him, warmth had returned to a space once filled with fear. And in that warmth, something fragile was beginning to grow again, hope.